He cheated and laughed about it in front of our guests until I hit play on the big screen. The laughter from downstairs echoed through our bedroom as I stood frozen, watching my wife of 12 years wrap her arms around another man's neck. Through the crack in our bedroom door, I could see them clearly. Sarah and Marcus, my business partner, locked in an embrace that shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. "Did you see Reese's face when you told that story about the late client meetings?" Sarah whispered, her voice carrying that conspiratorial tone I'd heard her use with her girlfriends, but never thought would be directed against me. Marcus chuckled, his hands roaming where they had no right to be. "He's so trusting. Probably thinks we're down here discussing quarterly reports." "My name is Reese Johnson. I'm 38 years old, and until 3 minutes ago, I thought I was living the American dream. Successful tech consulting firm, beautiful house in Westchester County, and a marriage I believed was built on love and mutual respect." The dinner party downstairs was supposed to be celebrating our 12th wedding anniversary. 20 of our closest friends and family members, including my parents who'd flown in from California, were currently enjoying the catered meal I'd arranged to surprise Sarah. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was the one being surprised. I'd come upstairs to grab the anniversary video I'd spent weeks creating, a montage of our best memories set to her favorite song. I was planning to play it on the big screen in our living room after dinner, a romantic gesture to show everyone how much I loved my wife. Instead, I was watching her betray that love with the man I'd trusted to help build our business from the ground up. "We should go back down," Sarah said, but she made no move to separate from Marcus. "Reese will start looking for me soon." "Let him look," Marcus replied, his voice thick with arrogance. "Poor guy has no idea his perfect little wife has been getting what she needs somewhere else." The cruel laughter that followed felt like a physical blow. These weren't the words of people caught up in a moment of passion. This was calculated, deliberate, and had clearly been going on for far longer than just tonight. I backed away from the door, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to burst in there and confront them immediately, but something held me back. Maybe it was the sound of our guests' voices drifting up from below, or maybe it was the businessman in me recognizing that revenge served cold is always more effective than hot anger. I made my way back downstairs, my face carefully composed into the same smile I'd been wearing all evening. Our dining room was full of warmth and conversation, my parents sharing stories about their early marriage, Sarah's sister Susan talking about her new promotion, our neighbors discussing their upcoming vacation to Italy. Everyone looked so genuinely happy to be celebrating our anniversary. They had no idea they were witnessing the end of my marriage rather than a milestone in it. "Where's Sarah?" my mother asked as I rejoined the group. "And Marcus?" I wanted to ask him about that new client he mentioned. "They're upstairs handling some urgent business calls," I replied smoothly. "You know how it is with international clients. Different time zones and all." The lie came easily, which surprised me. I'd never been good at deception, always preferring direct honesty in both business and personal relationships. But watching my wife and business partner deceive me so effortlessly upstairs had apparently awakened some dormant survival instincts. "Reese is such a workaholic," Susan laughed. "Even on his anniversary, he's letting Sarah take business calls." If only she knew what kind of business Sarah was conducting upstairs. I excused myself to the Kit Johnson, ostensibly to check on dessert preparations, but really to give myself time to think. The anniversary video was still upstairs, sitting on my laptop. But as I stood there surrounded by the remnants of the elaborate dinner I'd planned, a different idea began to form. Our house's security system was top of the line, something I'd insisted on when we moved in 3 years ago. Multiple cameras throughout the property, all connected to a central server in my home office. I'd never used them to spy on Sarah, the thought had never occurred to me, but they were there, silently recording everything. including, I realized, with a mixture of dread and opportunity, whatever was happening in our bedroom right now. I slipped into my office and pulled up the security system interface on my computer. The cameras could be accessed remotely and their feeds could be displayed on any screen in the house, including the 75-inch smart TV in our living room that I'd planned to use for the anniversary video. My hands shook slightly as I navigated through the camera options. Did I really want to see more? Did I want to know exactly how deep this betrayal went? The sound of footsteps on the stairs made my decision for me. I quickly minimized the security interface and returned to the Kit Johnson, where Sarah and Marcus were now rejoining the party. Sarah looked radiant, her cheeks flushed and her smile bright as she apologized to everyone for the interruption. "Sorry about that. You know how demanding clients can be." Marcus nodded seriously, playing his part perfectly. Technology never sleeps, unfortunately. But hey, that's what makes us successful, right, Reese? The casual way he used my name, the friendly pat on my shoulder, the complete lack of shame or guilt in his expression, it was masterful. If I hadn't seen them together upstairs, I never would have suspected a thing. "Absolutely," I replied, matching his tone. "Success requires sacrifices." I caught Sarah's quick glance at Marcus, saw the tiny smile that passed between them. They thought they were so clever, conducting their affair right under my nose at our anniversary party. They had no idea what they just handed me. "Well, now that we're all here," I announced, raising my wine glass, "I have a little surprise for Sarah, something I've been working on for weeks." Sarah's face lit up with what appeared to be genuine delight. "Reese, you didn't have to." "Of course I did," I interrupted. 12 years of marriage deserves something special, something memorable. I walked over to the entertainment center and powered up the big screen TV. Everyone gathered in the living room, settling into chairs and couches with their wine glasses, clearly expecting some kind of romantic presentation. I wanted to create something that would show everyone here exactly what our marriage means to me, I continued, my finger hovering over the remote control. Something that reveals the truth about our relationship. Sarah was beaming, completely unsuspecting. Marcus had positioned himself near the back of the room, probably thinking he was being discreet. "This is so sweet," my mother whispered to my father. "Reese always was the romantic one." I looked around the room at all these people who loved us, who had come here tonight to celebrate what they believed was a happy marriage. In about 30 seconds, they were going to see exactly how wrong they were. "The thing about truth," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest, "is that it has a way of coming to light, no matter how carefully people try to hide it." Sarah's smile flickered slightly. Something in my tone must have registered as off. "Reese?" she said quietly. "What?" I pressed play. The security camera feed from our bedroom filled the 75-inch screen in high definition. The timestamp showed it was from 15 minutes ago. There was no audio, but the visual was unmistakably clear. Sarah and Marcus in an intimate embrace, her hands tangled in his hair, his mouth on her neck. The silence in the room was deafening. Then Susan screamed. My mother's wine glass shattered on the hardwood floor. Sarah's face went white as she stared at the screen, watching her betrayal play out in front of everyone she cared about. Marcus tried to move toward the TV, probably to turn it off, but my father, all 68 years of him, stepped into his path with a look that could have melted steel. "I think you should stay right where you are, son," my father said quietly. On screen, the recorded Sarah was whispering something to Marcus, and though we couldn't hear the words, her body language made her meaning crystal clear. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a recent development. This was practiced intimacy between two people who had been together many times before. "Reese," Sarah's voice was barely audible. "Reese, I can explain." "Can you?" I asked, still holding the remote. "Because what I'm seeing looks pretty self-explanatory." The recording continued, showing Marcus's hands exploring my wife's body with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. Several of our female guests had turned away, but the men in the room were watching with the kind of horrified fascination reserved for natural disasters. "Turn it off," Marcus said, finally finding his voice. This is illegal. You can't record people without their consent." "In my own house?" I replied calmly. "On my own security system? I think you'll find that's perfectly legal, Marcus, especially since this is my bedroom you're desecrating with my wife." Susan was crying now, her husband's arm around her shoulders as she stared at her sister with obvious devastation. Sarah had always been the golden child, the perfect wife and successful career woman that everyone admired. Seeing her reduced to this was clearly shattering more than just my world. "How long?" my mother asked, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. She was looking directly at Sarah, her expression colder than I'd ever seen it. "How long have you been betraying my son?" Sarah opened her mouth, then closed it again. What could she possibly say? The evidence was literally playing out on the big screen behind her. "The business trips to Chicago," I said, pieces falling into place as I spoke. "The late nights at the office. The conference in Miami that Marcus suddenly had to attend at the last minute. The same conference where you said you were going to visit your college roommate." Each revelation hit the room like another physical blow. Our guests weren't just witnessing the end of my marriage, they were seeing the elaborate web of lies that had been necessary to sustain the affair. "That roommate who conveniently moved to Miami 6 months ago," I continued. "Except when I called to thank her for hosting you, she had no idea what I was talking about. She's been living in Denver for 2 years." Sarah's sister Susan looked like she'd been slapped. "Sarah, you told me Rachel was in Miami. You asked me to cover for you with Reese when—" She stopped, horrified realization dawning on her face. "Oh my God, I helped you. You made me part of your lies." The recording had moved on to show Marcus and Sarah in a more intimate position, and I finally turned off the screen. The damage was done. Everyone in the room understood exactly what they had witnessed. 12 years, I said, looking directly at Sarah. 12 years of marriage, and this is how you celebrate our anniversary. In our bedroom, with my business partner, while our friends and family wait downstairs to honor our commitment to each other. "Reese, please," Sarah whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Can we talk about this privately?" "Privately." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You mean the way you and Marcus were talking privately upstairs? The way you've been talking privately for God knows how long?" Marcus finally spoke up, his earlier confidence completely gone. "Look, Reese, this isn't how we wanted—" "Wanted what?" I interrupted. "To get caught? To humiliate me in front of everyone I care about? Or did you want to steal my wife and my business partner at the same time?" The room was watching this exchange like spectators at a tennis match, their heads turning back and forth between us. I realized that many of them were probably trying to figure out how to leave gracefully, but the sheer audacity of what they'd witnessed was keeping them frozen in place. "The business," my father said suddenly. "Reese, what does this mean for the business?" It was a good question. Marcus and I had built Johnson Rodriguez Consulting from nothing 5 years ago. He handled sales and client relationships. I managed the technical side and operations. Our partnership agreement was ironclad, or at least I'd thought it was. "It means," I said slowly, "that Marcus is going to discover what happens when you mix business with betrayal." I'd spent the last few minutes thinking through the implications while our drama played out. Marcus had access to our client databases, our financial records, our proprietary systems. If he'd been planning to leave with Sarah, he'd probably been preparing to take as much of our business as possible. "The Hartwell Industries contract," I said, watching Marcus's face carefully. "The one we've been negotiating for 3 months. You told me last week that they were still considering our proposal." Marcus's expression confirmed my suspicion before he could speak. You already signed them, didn't you? I continued. Signed them to a new company. Your new company. The one you've been setting up while pretending to be my partner. Sarah looked genuinely shocked at this revelation, which told me she hadn't been part of the business betrayal. She'd just been part of the personal one. Reese, Marcus said carefully, you're upset, and I understand that, but you're making assumptions. Am I? I pulled out my phone and opened my email. Because I have a very interesting message here from Tom Hartwell. Apparently, he sent it to both of our emails by mistake. The one thanking Rodriguez Solutions for the excellent proposal and confirming the start date for next month. The color drained from Marcus's face. Rodriguez Solutions, I repeated. Interesting name choice. I assume Sarah was going to be your business manager once you stole my clients? Our guests were now witnessing not just adultery, but corporate theft. The scope of the betrayal was expanding in real time, and I could see several people pulling out their phones, probably to text spouses or friends about this incredible drama they were witnessing. This is insane, Marcus said, finally showing some anger. You can't prove any of this. You're just a jealous husband making wild accusations. Can't I? I smiled for the first time since this nightmare began. Marcus, you've been using our shared cloud storage for months to prepare your new business. Did you really think I wouldn't notice new folders appearing in our supposedly secure systems? I'd actually discovered the business betrayal 2 weeks ago, when I'd noticed unusual file access patterns in our company systems. I'd been planning to confront Marcus about it privately, assuming there was some innocent explanation. Now I understood that the business theft and the personal betrayal were part of the same larger plan. You are going to take Sarah, my clients, and probably my business processes all at once, I said. Clean sweep. Leave me with nothing while you two started your new life together. That's not... Sarah started, but I held up my hand. Actually, Sarah, I'm curious about your role in this. Were you planning to divorce me before or after Marcus had stolen enough of our business to support you both? The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Sarah looked from me to Marcus and back again, clearly realizing that she was caught between two betrayals, the personal one she'd participated in, and the business one she might not have fully understood. I didn't know about the business, she said quietly. Reese, I swear I didn't know he was planning to steal from you. But you knew you were planning to leave me, I replied. You knew this affair was leading somewhere permanent. Her silence was answer enough. My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I think it's time for your father and me to go to our hotel, she said, her voice carefully controlled. She looked at Sarah with obvious disgust. Sarah, I want you to know that you haven't just broken my son's heart tonight. You've destroyed the respect of everyone in this room. She was right. Looking around at our guests, I could see the same expression on every face. Shock, disappointment, and something approaching revulsion. These were people who had known Sarah for years, who had considered her family, who had celebrated her successes and supported her through difficulties. Now they were seeing her as she really was, someone capable of elaborate deception and casual cruelty. Mom, wait, I said. You don't have to leave. This is still our anniversary party. No, son, my father said gently. This is something else entirely now. One by one, our guests began to excuse themselves. Some offered quick words of support, others just left in uncomfortable silence. Within 20 minutes, the house that had been full of laughter and celebration was nearly empty. Only Sarah, Marcus, and I remained. Well, I said, settling into my favorite armchair. This is cozy. Sarah had been crying steadily, but now she wiped her eyes and tried to compose herself. Reese, we need to talk about this rationally. We need to figure out how to handle the divorce, the business, everything. Do we? I asked. Because it seems like you and Marcus have already figured out how to handle everything. You've been planning this for months, haven't you? Marcus finally sat down, apparently realizing that running away wasn't going to solve his problems. Look, Reese, nobody planned for it to happen this way. Things just evolved. Evolved, I repeated. That's an interesting way to describe fraud, adultery, and theft. It's not theft if we were planning to compete fairly. With my client list? With my proprietary systems? With information you gained as my business partner? I shook my head. That's not competition, Marcus. That's corporate espionage. The room fell silent except for the grandfather clock in the corner marking the passage of time. Each tick seemed to emphasize how dramatically my life had changed in the space of a single evening. What do you want? Sarah asked finally. It was a good question. What did I want? An hour ago, I'd wanted a successful anniversary party and a happy marriage. Now I wanted what? Revenge? Justice? Just to make the pain stop? I want honesty, I said. For once in God knows how long, I want complete honesty from both of you. Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. How long? I asked. How long has this been going on? 8 months, Sarah whispered. 8 months. Not a momentary lapse in judgment or a recent development. 8 months of deliberate deception, of lying to my face every single day, of making me complicit in my own humiliation. And the business plan? I looked at Marcus. 3 months, he admitted. Sarah didn't know about it until recently. What was the timeline? I pressed. When were you planning to leave? When were you going to steal my clients? When were you going to file for divorce? Sarah looked miserable, but she answered. We were going to wait until Marcus had established the new company. Then I was going to ask for a trial separation, then divorce. While I unknowingly helped Marcus steal everything I'd worked for, I said. Elegant plan. It wasn't supposed to hurt you this much, Marcus said, which was possibly the stupidest thing he could have said. Really? How exactly did you think stealing my wife and my business was going to feel? I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the neighborhood where Sarah and I had planned to grow old together. The houses were dark now, their occupants probably settling in for the night, completely unaware that one of their neighbors was having his entire life destroyed. Here's what's going to happen, I said, turning back to face them. Sarah, you can file for divorce or I will. I don't particularly care which. You can have whatever the law says you're entitled to from our personal assets. But, given your adultery, I suspect that won't be as much as you might hope. Sarah nodded miserably. Marcus, I continued, you're going to discover that stealing from your business partner is more complicated than you thought. The Hartwell contract you signed with Rodriguez Solutions? It violates our non-compete agreement. The client information you've been copying? That's proprietary data belonging to Johnson Rodriguez Consulting. The systems and processes you've been planning to use? I developed most of those myself. Marcus was looking increasingly uncomfortable. So here's your choice, I said. You can try to fight me in court, which will be expensive and public and will probably result in criminal charges for corporate theft. Or you can dissolve Rodriguez Solutions, return my clients and my data, and accept that your career in this industry is over? You can't just destroy my career because I made a personal mistake, Marcus protested. Personal mistake? I laughed. Marcus, you've been systematically stealing from me for months while sleeping with my wife. This isn't a personal mistake. This is a criminal enterprise. The legal implications were just beginning to sink in for both of them. Adultery might be morally wrong, but it wasn't illegal. Corporate theft, however, was a different matter entirely. What about the security recording? Sarah asked quietly. Are you going to show it to other people? I considered the question. The recording was devastating evidence of her betrayal, but it was also incredibly personal and humiliating for all of us. That depends, I said finally, on how cooperative you both are going forward. It was a threat, but a reasonable one. I had no desire to broadcast my personal humiliation to the world, but I also wasn't going to let them destroy my life without consequences. "I need time to think," Sarah said, standing up. "I need to figure out what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go." "You can stay here tonight," I said. "But tomorrow, we start figuring out how to untangle this mess." Marcus started to stand as well, but I held up my hand. "Marcus, you should probably find somewhere else to sleep tonight, and you should probably start looking for a lawyer." He left without another word, and suddenly Sarah and I were alone in the house where we'd spent 5 years of our marriage. "Reese," she said softly, "I know you probably can't believe this right now, but I never wanted to hurt you this much." I looked at my wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, and tried to find some remnant of the person I'd fallen in love with. She was still beautiful, still the woman I'd dreamed of growing old with. But she was also a stranger who had been systematically destroying my life for months. "Sarah," I said finally, "the problem isn't that you hurt me. The problem is that you were willing to hurt me at all." She nodded and headed upstairs, leaving me alone in the living room where we'd just celebrated our anniversary with 20 of our closest friends and family members. I walked over to the entertainment center and ejected the USB drive containing the security footage. Such a small thing to hold such devastating power. My phone was buzzing with text messages, friends and family wanting to know if I was okay, if there was anything they could do. I turned it off. Tonight, I just wanted silence. As I sat in my chair, surrounded by the remnants of our anniversary party, I realized that my life was about to change completely. The marriage was over. The business partnership was over. But for the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't expected: relief. No more wondering why Sarah seemed distant. No more questioning my own instincts when something felt wrong. No more trusting someone who was systematically betraying the trust. The next few months were going to be difficult. Divorce proceedings, business litigation, rebuilding my professional reputation. But they were also going to be honest. No more lies, no more deception, no more living in someone else's carefully constructed fiction. I poured myself a drink and raised the glass toward the big screen where my wife's betrayal had played out in high definition. "Here's to the truth," I said to the empty room. "And to people who are stupid enough to record their crimes on security cameras." The grandfather clock chimed midnight, officially ending our anniversary and beginning the first day of my new life. 3 weeks later, I was sitting in my lawyer's office reviewing the divorce settlement when my phone rang. It was Detective Morrison from the White Plains Police Department. "Mr. Johnson? We've completed our investigation into the corporate theft allegations you filed against Marcus Rodriguez." I'd pressed charges 2 days after the anniversary party, once I'd had time to document all the files Marcus had stolen and the contracts he'd illegally signed using proprietary information from our company. "What did you find?" "Enough to charge him with grand larceny, computer fraud, and violation of trade secrets laws. The district attorney wants to know if you're interested in a plea agreement or if you want to take this to trial." I thought about Marcus's smug face when he'd told Sarah that I was too trusting to catch them. I thought about the elaborate lies, the stolen clients, the complete disregard for our 5-year partnership. What kind of plea agreement? Full restitution, forfeiture of all stolen materials, permanent injunction against using your proprietary systems, and 18 months in county jail. It was more than I'd hoped for. Marcus would lose everything he'd stolen, plus his freedom, plus his reputation in an industry where trust was everything. "I'll take it," I said. After I hung up, I walked to the window of my lawyer's office and looked down at the busy street below. Somewhere out there, Sarah was starting her new life as a soon-to-be divorced woman with a dramatically reduced lifestyle. Marcus was about to start his new life as a convicted felon. and I was starting my new life as someone who had learned the hard way that the most important person you can trust is yourself. My phone buzzed with a text from my business manager. Johnson Consulting just landed the Morrison Industries contract, $2.3 million over 3 years. Congratulations, boss. I smiled. It turned out that losing a cheating wife and a stealing business partner was the best thing that had ever happened to my career. Without Marcus's lazy sales approach and Sarah's constant financial demands, I was free to build the company I'd always envisioned. 6 months later, I was featured on the cover of Tech Entrepreneur magazine with the headline, "Rising from Betrayal: How One Man Built an Empire from the Ashes of Deception." The article mentioned my divorce and Marcus's conviction, but focused primarily on how I'd transformed a devastating personal crisis into unprecedented business success. Johnson Consulting now employed 15 people and was expanding into new markets every quarter. I kept a copy of the magazine in my office, not because I was proud of the publicity, but because it reminded me of an important lesson. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. The security footage from that anniversary party was still locked in my safe, but I'd never had to use it again. Sarah had been cooperative throughout the divorce proceedings, and Marcus had accepted his plea agreement without trying to drag me into a public trial. Sometimes the threat of consequences is more effective than the consequences themselves. I never remarried, but I didn't become a bitter recluse either. I dated, traveled, invested in other businesses, and built a life that was entirely my own. No compromises, no deception. No wondering if the person I trusted most was systematically destroying everything I'd worked for. On what would have been our 15th anniversary, I received a letter from Sarah. She was living in Portland now, working as a marketing coordinator for a small nonprofit. She'd married Marcus after his release from jail, and they were struggling financially but trying to build something honest. The letter was an apology, a real one. Not the desperate justification she'd offered that night 3 years ago. She acknowledged the damage she'd caused, accepted responsibility for her choices, and expressed genuine remorse for the pain she'd inflicted. I appreciated the letter, but I didn't respond to it. That chapter of my life was closed, and I had no interest in reopening it. Instead, I donated the money from my anniversary party budget, the party that had never been properly celebrated, to a charity that helped people rebuild their lives after devastating betrayals. It seemed like a fitting way to honor the destruction that had ultimately led to my rebirth. That evening, I poured myself a drink and watched the sunset from my new apartment overlooking the Hudson River. It was smaller than the house I'd shared with Sarah, but it was entirely mine. Every decision, from the furniture to the artwork to the view, reflected my choices and nobody else's. My phone rang, a client with an urgent project that would probably keep me working late into the night. 3 years ago, that would have been a source of stress. Another demand that pulled me away from my marriage. Now it was just another opportunity to build something meaningful with people I could trust. I answered the phone with a smile. Johnson Consulting, this is Reese. How can I help you? The future was wide open, and for the first time in years that felt like a promise rather than a threat. I answered the phone with a smile. Johnson Consulting, this is Reese. How can I help you? The future was wide open, and for the first time in years that felt like a promise rather than a threat.